This is The Birth of the Torah by Edward Zerin. We found it in the public domain, public access. No copyright infringement was intentional. We decided to bring it to all in a video format, so all can better understand the origins of the Torah and the Torah itself. Forward. Archaeology and the science of Bible study are infant sciences in the world of scholarship. The Bible is an ancient book in the field of religion. Recent archaeological findings and scientific studies have shed new light on biblical times. What impact have these findings had on the thoughts and attitudes of those who study and treasure the Holy Scriptures? This book deals primarily with the first 5 books of the Jewish Bible, or the Old Testament, as the Christian world calls it. Together, these 5 books constitute what the Jewish people call the Torah. The purpose of this volume is to describe how scholars in the fields of archaeology and the sciences of Bible study conceive of the birth of the Torah. It should be pointed out, however, that if one wishes to understand the role of the Torah in contemporary Jewish life, he will need to carry the story beyond the limits of the present volume. The Torah represents but the first, although a most important phase in the total literature of Judaism. The birth of the Torah, as we shall see, took place during the 5th century b.c.e. Although the official list or canon of books to be included in the entire Jewish Bible was not formalized until 90 CE, the last of the Bible books was completed. Scholars hold in the 2nd century b.c.e, even as the Bible was being completed. However, the laws of the Torah were being extended in 220 CE. All interpretations and new laws of the previous 4 centuries, which sought to explain the teachings of the Torah, were collected into 63 different books, divided into 6 orders or main parties, and called the Mishnah, or the review of the Torah. The Mishnah sought to make the laws of the Torah relevant to the early post-biblical generation. The next extension of the Torah was the Gemara, which in 550 CE brought together additional interpretations and laws developed since the completion of the Mishnah. The combined writings of the Mishnah and Gemara made up the Talmud, and were so arranged that each paragraph of the Mishnah was followed by that portion of the Gemara which represented the extension of the Torah law. In addition, commentaries, codes and responsa literature were written throughout the succeeding centuries. Today, if one seeks to know the significance of the Torah for modern Judaism, he must be familiar not only with the Torah in its own historic development, but also with the literary development in the 25 centuries which followed the birth of the Torah. The acknowledgements. The birth of the Torah grew out of many years of study and teaching. It came to fulfillment, however, only with the help of many persons, and it gives gratitude to his teachers who inspired him, etc. Dr. Edward Zerin, Temple Benai Jeshurun, Des Moines, Iowa, USA, May 18, 1961. Contents page. Contents continued, with appendix, notes and index. The birth of the Torah. We were reading this briefly, and we decided to compare it with the original ancient Tav Esrei Lishana Atika Sepreya, the Brita, the Exodus, etc., translated into the nearest English equivalent by native-born Aramaic-speaking translator from Mesopotamia, Syria, Victor N. Alexander. This is the Old Testament, Torah, Chapter 1, Archaeology and the Science of Bible Study. Throughout the ages, men have asked questions about the authorship of the 5 books of Moses. The traditionally recognized concept was that God had revealed either by dictating or by presenting it in written form, or both. These 5 books, or the Torah as they are called in Judaism, to Moses at Mount Sinai. This Torah was infallible, authoritative and sacred. In time, however, people began to raise questions about the Torah. Often these questions were raised by religious people who believed in the truth of the Bible. Nonetheless, they were puzzled about some of the things they found. For example, they asked, how could Moses, who is supposed to have written down the 5 books of Moses, have written about his own death and the events which followed, as found in Deuteronomy 34:5-12? Well, we believe through our research that we found, writings on it, that we found that Jews actually have admitted that Moses was, this book, or these books were attributed to Moses, because they have this ancient tradition or custom where if there's a scroll written, they had to put a name to it, so that, as they said, they attributed it to Moses, because it's the 10 Commandments, the Mosaic Law, the Torah, etc., etc. So they are admitting, acknowledging that perhaps he didn't write it, it was written by the hand of somebody else. Because, as they say here, how could Moses, who is supposedly to have written down the 5 books of Moses, have written about his own death and the events which followed, as found in Deuteronomy 34:5-12? And then they asked the next question: if the world is governed by natural law, how can one explain the miracles of the Bible? Example, the crossing of the Red Sea. 3. If God is the spiritual God of the entire world and cannot be seen, how can one explain such a phrase as the hand of God, which is used throughout the Bible, and the numerous other phrases of the Bible which describe God in human form? If geology tells us that the world is millions and millions of years old, how can one believe the story of creation? And we, through reading the Torah, Excerpt, b.c.e, Exodus, etc., figured out, we came to realise there were valid explanations within that b.c.e, or that in Aramaic, or that Genesis in English. Because these individuals still believed that every word of the Torah was divinely revealed, they tried in every way possible to reconcile the truth of the Torah with what their reason and experience told them should be true. They developed, as a result, explanations which to them sounded reasonable and therefore acceptable. This method is called harmonization. The following outline illustrates some of the ways by which people have tried to harmonize reason and experience with regard to the above question. 1. Obviously, no person can write about the events after his death. However, Moses did write the entire Torah, with the exception of this one passage, which was written by Joshua after Moses had died. Well, that can't be, if the Jews we found have admitted to attributing all to Moses. They didn't actually, he possibly didn't write it. Okay, because how can you write of your death? Yeah, how can you know that unless God told you? Well, how could you be writing after your death if that's one of the factors? Yeah, obviously no person can write about events after he died, right? 2. The world is governed by natural law. However, even before creation took place, God had provided for the appearance of these miracles at a given time. Consequently, the appearance of the miracle did not break God's conception of natural law. The miracle was but the natural occurrence of an event. God is not an arbitrary God who interferes with the normal processes of the universe. Yeah, natural law is natural law. If it happens like that, it happens like that. He's not going to interfere in it unless it's for a reason. A valid reason, once these have been established by him. 3. The Bible spoke the language of men. Therefore, when the Bible referred to the hand of God, it did not mean specifically or literally a hand, as human beings conceive it. The term hand of God was a symbol of the power of God. Well, it's like we think in human ways. We have the human conception or perception or perspective. We see it that way. Okay, God's ways are very different to ours. So how can we really understand God? So it has to be put in a way that we can understand what's being said, what's being put across. 4. The world may in truth be millions of years old, as man counts time. However, when the biblical writers referred to a day of creation, they may very well have referred to a day in terms of God's conception of time. Each of the 6 days of creation may very well have been millions of years long, according to the reckoning of men. Okay, so what we do now is we go to b.c.e in the Aramaic, or Genesis in English. Okay, and it reads, "At the beginning the Son of God creates heavens and the earth was for him," etc., etc. And we get to b.c.e or Genesis 1:5, "And God called the light day, and the darkness night, and the evening and the morning became part of one cycle," of the first eon. So we look at the footnotes at the bottom provided by the translator. Aramaic word imama, that's for day. And the darkness night is a footnote indication there, which is 152, literal Aramaic word lilia, for night. And the evening and the morning became part of one cycle. So it begins at the evening and ends in the morning, and that became part of one cycle, the first eon, footnote indicated there. 153, literal Aramaic word euma, eon, immeasurable period or unfathomable period. That means that nobody was created, no man was created to write it down, say, okay, God set his alarm clock for 4 o'clock and got up at 7 and finished work about 9 at night or 1 in the morning. Okay, nobody knows. It's unfathomable. We don't know. We can't put a date. Yeah, can't put a day, a month, a year to it, or a time frame. Okay, so it's an immeasurable period, unfathomable period, age, or era, or eon, or day with a capital D. Okay, so here it explains the world may in truth be millions of years old as man counts time. However, when the biblical writers referred to a day of creation, they may very well have referred to a day in terms of a God's conception of time. Each of the 6 days of creation may very well have been millions of years long, according to the reckoning of men. So this Torah being in the Hebrew, okay, the Tab Ivri, the original ancient Hebrew, being the sister language of the Tab Asherit, okay, having the same words with the same meanings until later on, perhaps with the Masoretic text, they added the vowels, because they both had consonants, no vowels. Even though Aramaic has an A, say on the end of Allah, it signifies duality. So that, in that sense, it's like verifying the triune Godhead, that there's 3 in one, or 3 as one. Okay, there's God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. Okay, it's not a vowel as such. But when the Masoretes added vowels, probably to make it easier to write, easier to speak, etc., to verbalize, then that changed not only the structure of the language and the meaning of the words, but also then created in the Aramaic similar words in the Hebrew, but with different meanings. Okay, like Iyuma, immeasurable period, unfathomable period, etc., and Yom for day, a literal day. But in the Hebrew sense, like it says here, that Yom could actually mean of era, of an eon, of an age, or a day with a capital D, which may have been a period of 1,000,000 years or longer, according to the reckoning of men. Okay, science, etc. Because don't forget, there's scriptures that say a day is like 1,000 years to God, or 1,000 years is like a day to God. Okay? That's probably the better way to understand it. He took his time, basically. Religious people throughout the ages have used the power of reasoning or logic to help square what they read in the Torah with what they found in the experiences of their lives. With the advent of science, however, a new method was developed for the examination of ancient documents. This new approach was a historical method, and when it was applied to the Torah, the result was the emergence of the science of Bible study. Instead of trying to explain away by the power of reason the difficulties of the Torah, the new method suggested a completely different approach. For example, certain questions were asked and answered about the Torah. 1. Who wrote it? Who wrote the Torah? 2. When was the Torah written? 3. How was the Torah written? 4. Why was the Torah written? And for whom was the Torah written? 5 valid reasons. As a result of the approach of the science of Bible study, certain conclusions about the origin and development of the Torah were reached. 1. Who? Moses was not the author of the entire Torah. Many people participated in the writing of the Torah. These are many conclusions that were reached, okay, about the origin and development of the Torah. 2. When? Nor was the Torah written all at once, or all at one time. The Torah was written over a period of nearly 1,000 years, with these earliest identified written parts going back to approximately 1250 b.c.e, and the last part being written about 400 b.c.e. 3. How? In the beginning, parts of the Torah were handed down, both by word of mouth or verbally, or orally, and in written form. Many years later, these traditions were edited and new ideas added. Okay? So they looked at, they were examined, and then they were edited. Bits and pieces were cut out, omitted, and then inserted new ideas. This editing process took place at least 4 different times. The first time, the ancient materials were collected by a set of editors living in Judah and the south of Canaan, sometimes during the 10th to the 9th centuries, 950 to 850 b.c.e. There's a footnote indicated there. That's probably in the index. These editors are referred to as the J School because they use the name Yahweh or Jahweh or Yahweh for God. A little later, another group of arrangers living in the northern part of Canaan produced a second written version of the tradition. Since they used the name Elohim for God, they are known as the E School. The third written version arose in response to a religious reform that swept through Judah in the year 621 BCE. These editors are identified as the D School because they supposedly discovered a series of long-lost laws that in Greek eventually came to have the name Deuteronomy. Because Deus means two, right? D-E-U-S. Or Dos. The fourth interpretation of the tradition took place around the year 550 to 450 BCE. These writers came to be known as the P School because it is believed that they were priests. Finally, the editions of all these 4 schools were put together and edited by the P School. The result was the Torah as we know it today. Okay, so you could relate the Book of Q by the Friends of Jesus Society to this, okay, because they use a similar method. Okay, P is priest, E is Elohimist, Y is Yahweh, Yahwist, and probably P for priest, etc. Yeah, have a look at that book. Compare the two, because apparently in that Q, there's like whoever wrote it or copied it is in the margin, their initials, the date, and all this sort of stuff. 4. Why? The Torah represented a constitution which guided the lives of our ancestors in ancient times, or the Jewish ancestors in ancient times. It set forth the laws and rules by which the people were to live. In fact, the Torah may be called a collection of 4 different constitutions. Each constitution came into being to meet the specific needs of different periods of Jewish life. Finally, the constitutions were put together to make them seem like one final constitution. 5. For whom? Each constitution was a guide of laws and rules by which the people of that particular time were to live. The historical method is not an exclusively Jewish point of view. It is shared alike by Gentiles and Jews and is applied to both the Old and New Testaments. In fact, the science of Bible study was developed first at the University of Paris in 1733 by Professor Jean Astruc. He was a non-Jew interested in tracing what seemed to him to be duplicating or contradictory stories in the book of Genesis. Since then, many Gentile scholars have pursued the line of study set forth by Professor Astruc. The climax came in 1876 with the development of the documentary hypothesis by two German scholars, Graf and Wellhausen. It was they who first set forth a complete theory about the four basic documents that make up the Torah. These documents, or constitutions as we have called them, were the products of four schools of writers or editors, known as J, E, D and P. The followers of Graf Wellhausen are known as modernists, in contrast to the traditionalists, who continue to believe in the Mosaic authorship of the Torah. Many Jewish scholars have followed in their footsteps and have adopted the modernist teaching as their own. Because of the use of the historical method, Gentile and Jewish modernists are no longer called upon to harmonize contradictory passages in the Torah. To the contrary, the contradiction for them serve as invaluable clues to the discovery of the JEDP schools. The key to reading the Bible is to read it with the historical method, to see it as a series of books written by men, albeit extraordinary ones, in a given time and place. We are then never called upon to justify the biblical text against our deepest beliefs and hopes. We do not have to blind ourselves to those occasional passages where the Bible is untrue to our highest insights, nor do we have to make separate compartments in our mind to believe simultaneously in the primitive scientific statements of several. So what's that saying there? If something's wrong, incorrect or untrue in there, to our understanding, we don't have to make separate compartments in our mind to believe simultaneously in the primitive scientific statements of several thousand years ago. So maybe in one pocket of your mind, okay, that's untrue, and another pocket, oh, okay, that's actually true, and you're going from untrue to true, back and forth, maybe it's saying that's something like that. Okay, we learn from today's laboratories. What is more, we can see the Bible against its time and come to recognize more clearly not just what is it naturally shared of it, but where it stepped outside it and spoke with a voice that still rings with meaning in our own hearts or minds. Since 1876, the views of the early modernists have been superseded by those of the contemporary modernists. Here, too, the views are shared by Gentiles and Jews alike. The transition from the views of the early to the contemporary modernists came about with the development of the science of archaeology as a partner with the science of Bible study for the understanding of Scripture. Modern archaeology has had a tremendous impact on biblical scholars. While archaeological findings in general have tended to support the modernist point of view, the discoveries have led even the modernists to make certain revisions in their theories. The concept of JEDP is a case in point. Formerly, it was believed that the editors of the J school, which was regarded to be the earliest school, had resources only to oral traditions. Now we know that the earliest editors had available to them considerable written as well as oral materials. Moreover, contemporary modernists now look upon JEDP as parallel schools, each using materials which had been preserved from very early times rather than as consecutive schools, one building on top of the other, or separate building on top of each other.